Somehow we are done January. I cannot fathom it. It's gone by so fast, but I did manage to read 14 books in this month. I honestly do not know how, but I did. So I thought I'd do a little January reading wrap up and share with you the books that I read and what I rated them. Let me know in the comments what your first read of 2024 was and what you rated it. I'm really curious to see what everybody started their year off with. Luckily for me, I started off my year strong and I read Murder on the Links by Agatha Christie, and this one was 5 stars for me. I really loved it. It's the second installment of the Hercule Poirot series by Agatha Christie. You don't have to read them in order, but I'm trying to go back and read them in order, so I chose to read this one, and it was so good. Such a great murder mystery. The only thing I will say is it definitely had a lot less golf than I expected. You would think that by the cover it would probably have like quite a bit. It didn't, which is fine. I mean, that's fine with me. Then I read Frankenstein by Junji Ito, and this one was also 5 stars. I had a really strong start to my 2024. This one I absolutely loved. It's definitely one of my favorites by Junji Ito now. The only thing I will say is if you do decide to read this, I do not recommend reading it home alone unless you really like to be scared. I read this one when I was home alone and it definitely spooked me, and I won't be making that mistake again. Then I listened to Friends, Lovers, and the Big Terrible Thing by Matthew Perry. I don't own this book. I borrowed it from Libby. I also didn't rate it because I try not to rate autobiographies and like life stories because it just feels wrong to me personally to rate someone's life story. But I will say if you are a Friends fan or a Matthew Perry fan, I really recommend it. It was honestly a very emotional read, so I definitely recommend looking up like the content warning and such, but it was overall a very good book, and the audiobook was narrated by Matthew Perry himself, so that was a really nice addition as well. Then I read the poetry collection This Is for the Women Who Don't Give a Fuck by Jan Robinson. This one was all right. It's definitely not my favorite piece of feminist poetry, and it's also not my favorite poetry collection in general. So I rated this one 3 stars. I did like some of the poetry, and some of it I could definitely relate to, but there was other poems that I really couldn't relate to or just felt like not lyrical enough or detailed enough. I don't know. It was all right. I'm still on the fence about whether or not I'm actually going to keep this book. I don't know yet. Then I listened to Dear Girls by Ali Wong. I also borrowed this one from Libby, and it was narrated by Ali Wong herself, except for the epilogue, which was narrated by her husband. I really love this one as well, and if you enjoy Ali Wong's comedy, you'll definitely enjoy this audiobook. It was just as funny as her stand-up specials, but I once again didn't rate it because it's an autobiography about her life. Then I finally finished The Legend of Sleepy Hollow and Other Short Stories by Washington Irving, and this one I rated 1 star. I can appreciate what has come from his story, The Legend of Sleepy Hollow, but the actual short story itself was pretty boring, also kind of confusing and not very spooky. And then the rest of the short stories in here were like a compilation of short stories and essays, and I did not find them very intriguing. So this was 1 star, and I'm definitely going to be giving this book to someone else who will probably enjoy it more than I did. Then I read Layla by Colleen Hoover. Probably for the first quarter, I thought, wow, like this is a lot spookier than any of her other books, and I was really liking the direction it was heading, and then, I don't know, it kind of like the vibe kind of changed halfway through, and I found the ending kind of underwhelming. Originally, I thought it was going to be 5 stars, but I ended up rating it 4 stars just because of the ending. The book itself had so much going for it, and then when you got to the end, it was one of those ones where you're kind of like, that's it? That's all okay. Then I read The Pisces on My Kobo. I borrowed that one from Libby as well. This one is by Melissa Broder, and it is very strange, and I didn't know how to rate it because it was so weird and disturbing. It was hard to read at times and made me feel weird for reading it, but then also I couldn't put it down, so that was a good sign. But then it wasn't 5 stars because once again this book had a very underwhelming ending to me, so I definitely couldn't rate it 5 stars. I settled on 3 because part of me thought it was like a 1-star read, and another part of me thought 5 stars because I'll never read anything like it again, and it definitely was intriguing. Yeah, that one I definitely wouldn't recommend to most people just because it is very strange. If you do end up reading that one, I definitely recommend checking the content warning, and if you do not like animal cruelty or animal abuse, I would not recommend it at all because there was a couple disturbing scenes in that book that contains those kinds of things. Then I listened to the audiobook Into the Wild by Jon Krakauer. I've already read this book, so I knew I already liked it and it was 4 stars, but I wanted to listen to the audiobook instead this time, and that one was also 4 stars. It was really interesting to me though. I borrowed this one from Libby, and the copy that they had was narrated in the 90s, so it would literally stop every like 30 minutes and say, "This story continues on disc 2," and then go, "Disc 2," and then continue. It was very interesting. I've never listened to an audiobook that was originally recorded for just like CDs. So that kind of sucked me out of the story a bit occasionally, but I try not to let it bother me. I definitely find that with this book, a lot of people's opinions on it vary. I personally liked it, and I can really empathize with Chris McCandless and kind of see where he was coming from and why he did what he did. I don't want to spoil it for you, but it is a true story. So basically it's about a young man who just decides to screw society, screw his family, screw his friends, and wander off into the wild and live on his own in the wilderness off of the land. And I can definitely understand where he was coming from. Some people can't. They just think he was an absolute idiot, and he did end up dying. Going into the wild actually ended up killing him. It's actually not 100% known how and why he died. It's kind of like a mixture of things. But anyways, that one's really intriguing, and if you like nature and wilderness and you find stuff like that interesting, I definitely recommend it, but I know for sure it is not for everybody. And then last but definitely not least for January for me, I finally read the Heartstopper, that is backwards. I finally read the Heartstopper series, all 5 books. And when I got to the end of the 5th one, I found out that there is a 6th one coming out. And I am so happy about that because these were 100% 5-star reads. I really recommend these to everybody and anybody, but I really love these, and these will now forever hold a special place in my heart. I really loved Nick and Charlie's romance and love story, and I will definitely be looking into more books by this author because I really loved her style and her writing. So that was it for me for my January reads. I had a really great reading month, and I'm really hoping that the next 11 months hold just as many 5-star reads for me. Honestly, I wasn't expecting to read this much this month, but I'm really glad that I did because everything I picked up, I'm happy that I picked up. I hope you all had a really great reading month as well. I'll definitely see you guys soon in an upcoming reading vlog. I hope you guys have a great rest of your week and happy reading.